Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I've created to not only bring awareness to the reality, the lived experience of complex trauma, but to delve into the mechanisms, to tell trauma's story, and also to explore ways of healing. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series. And I want to delve into my own experience of the collapsing of the fog and what I physically or what I went through, with the hope of trying to be able to convey and explain where my understandings come from and some of the things I put forward that people go, and there's kind of no way. The things that push buttons that get shut down before they're even entertained. And I want to put forward a perspective that I believe is true. And that is one of the most common things I see when people reach out for help, when their body is going through hell, through a traumatic, trauma triggers or trauma responses, or living with trauma for many, many years, is so many of the tests always come back as negative. You're in a hell of a state, and often it requires ambulances and all these interventions. You're in ERs, but you're dismissed, you're humiliated, and you're discarded because the basic testing doesn't show anything. It comes back as normal. The reason I believe this happens is because all our body's defense systems are activated and triggered, but there's no external threat to respond to. Our systems are trying to recreate the responses to a threat environment it is remembering. Still physiologically, still neurologically, neurophysiologically. All the neurochemicals are there, all the body's responses are there, but there is no physical component to attack. Therefore, the markers that these tests look for are never going to be there. But the response still is there. And that causes the problem. But because it doesn't show up in basic testing, you don't get help. The quick fix, and I do agree there's a partial recognition of this within the medical system, because one of the first things you do when you end up in an ambulance or in the ER in these conditions is you're hit with morphine. Now, morphine instantly throws your HP axial response into a different state, which ends a lot of these responses and what your body's doing. But as soon as the morphine leaves your system, as soon as the opiate leaves your system, they come back. Now, this was the standard response I met. Now, when my fog, I've always been aware I was adopted. My adoption was not a good one. But when I was in Canada, I was led to Canada with, within the components of a relationship, but also my search for family and my search for community to try to find biological family, because I was originally from there, the US. And I was in a First Nations community at a conference up in Thessalon in Ontario. The conference was around, developing strategies to work with complex violence, alcohol dependencies, drug addictions, and so forth, family violence in communities. I was surrounded by elders and so forth, and members of these communities that had the same pheromonal read as my mum and dad, priming my body for stuff to happen. Being mixed race, especially when you're removed and adopted or taken from communities you're raised nowhere near these communities, and you're what's termed as white passing. I have light skin, so you're an outsider no matter what, and you're always having to prove no matter what. So there's a threat. It's not safe. It's not secure. And I was put into a position of a great deal of vulnerability, but it was highly beneficial, and we came up and we did a lot of work. But that primed my body. And then going to Fort Erie powwow on the way back, and with everything that was going on, because there were deer ticks, and I was not completely aware of the effects of limes, and also Giardia was present in the water up there, I more than likely had the double whammy. And when my body, just after Fort Erie powwow, the night after the powwow, the second day, I got sick. I aspirated and choked, and my entire physiology collapsed. As I've said in other videos, I know I was aspirated as an infant. I had my lungs suctioned out because I swallowed the macromium. My esophagus and everything closes every time I'm under threat. I struggle breathing and swallowing and so forth. And because I was in such a heightened state, I was very fatigued because I'd only just been back in Canada. I only flew in a few weeks prior. There's still a jet lag component. There's so many layers of threat and stress and pressure that at that moment I choked and couldn't breathe. I reached out, and there was not the help that was needed. Paramedics, hospital, so forth and so forth, pump full of morphine, sent back, humiliated. The coming days, the same deal, trying to go through doctors, trying to get the help to know why and find out what's going on. Like I'm sitting there, I'm like I got Parkinson's, I'm sitting there doing this. I have no control over it. I couldn't eat. I'd put on a fair bit of weight before this trip. I lost 40 kilo in a month. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't swallow. I felt this stuff, like my throat was choking constantly. There was so many fundamental layers of this. Fine motor control was gone. Memory was all over the place. I couldn't tell time. I was hearing voices and all these things, and not hearing voices in the schizophrenic sense, but hearing voices of people speaking in memories. And one of the key components that I've kept to myself my entire life is I've always remembered my mother screaming. And every time my life gets heightened or I'm under threat, that's all I hear is a woman screaming. 24/7. It's there. And I will have it in the telling of this video. But every medical test came back as negative. The insurance company, the travel insurance, were great. They did what they were able to the point where they even contacted the consulate to try to get, some help. Because 13 trips in ambulances, days spent in ER. A treatment for potential Giardia that destroyed my digestive system. And all they did was pump me full of morphine. And if I knew then what I knew now, after 15 years of delving into research and studies and everything else, like I knew a fair whack about trauma back then, but nothing compared to what I know now. And understanding the construction of what the fog actually is. I was in a highly vulnerable state under an extreme amount of pressure. Tipped over the edge. And I've seen this happen with other adoptees because of deathbed confessions, never knowing they were an adoptee. Their adopted mother's passing and they get told. I've seen it where they find out through DNA testing for donorship, bone marrow and different things, where their entire reality collapses because of the key component of what happened when they were born, and the trauma around that gets repeated. in the physical environment as it did in mine. I got sick, got taken to a hospital, bad things happened. Everything was recreated, and this entire structure of the fog, this entire neurophysiological structure of the fog collapsed. And there was all these competing responses that were very debilitating and in fact nearly killed me twice. I was resourced as a result of this. And this is where we need to understand, and in the medical profession need to get their head around. Basic testing will never show this stuff. But it doesn't take away from the severity of what is happening to the person in front of you. It is not in their head. Their body and nervous system is playing out a series of responses with nothing to fight. Excuse me. Like I said, I won't cut this out. But this is what my response does, because of the heightened nature of what I'm recalling. It is very real, and I've seen it, end the lives prematurely of a lot of adoptees over the years. And the truth needs to be told. And as I said, when you're dealing with early childhood and pre-verbal trauma, all these neurological responses are developmental, and they happen so early on in developmental stages that they become embedded as this is what the body goes, this is what I'm supposed to do. And they're not compatible, or when they're not compatible with adult physiology, or when they're competing against other autonomic systems going, hey, hang on a minute, you're threatening, you're trying to shut me down, and I don't want to, or I can't. You have all these competing responses going on within the nervous system and the body and within the brain. You get the lightning storm, you get the disorientation, you get the shutdown. And it's not a panic attack. Because it doesn't go away. And it goes on for days, weeks, months, and years. A panic attack passes. These responses in many of us don't. They're a day-to-day lived reality. And more research and understanding needs to be done. And what we try to convey and what we learn needs to be listened to. I will continue to do these videos on the fog because I'm trying to convey all the layers that we go through. But as always, please be mindful, please be respectful. I love your guys' feedback and comments. And I will see you next time. Hope.